consciousness. We're not looking at that degree of conductivity, but it's something which is quite unusual in biology. It's a conductance which is very strange and something very specific to these microtubules. I should say these are neuronal microtubules. They are brain microtubules, not human brain. They seem to be pig brain, but never mind. But he does seem to see these effects. There are, of course, arguments going on about these too. Okay, that's one new fact, which does seem to be very interesting. Another one relates to a question that I worried about when starting to think about these issues, was in the cerebrum, which is part most people think about when they think about the brain. You have, what is it, 10 to the, I can't remember how many neurons it is. 10 to 11, something like that. Okay, well there's another part of the brain called the cerebellum, which has about half as many neurons. It also has many, many more connections between neurons. That's the cerebellum, which, as far as we know, is entirely unconscious. Now, why is that part of the brain, which seems to be about as complicated, at least, if not more, and at least half as many neurons as the other part, is totally unconscious? If it was just to do with the numbers of them or anything, it's a huge difference. Now, some recent results have come about. This seems to be quite remarkable, in my opinion. Maybe I don't know how other people feel. But apparently there are two sets of experiments here, or two sets of observations. One has to do with people really tracking down where conscious experience does come in the brain. And you can track where the signals go in the brain, and they go this way and then that way. And it's only the third time that consciousness comes in, apparently. So you have these movements of signals. And I don't know exactly what I'm talking about here, but it's something like that. And on the third wave is where you get consciousness. And these are different parts of the brain. And the third one is further down inside, at a certain level where you have a large number of these cells called pyramidal cells. They look like a pyramid and they're a funny shape. And these cells seem to be the ones where primarily consciousness is coming in. Cerebellum doesn't have any. So that would address that. Are the ones which are primarily of interest in relation to consciousness. Well, the only thing else I would say here is they do seem to be very, very prominently full of microtubules. Microtubules are particularly prominent in these pyramidal cells. Now, I don't know where this is going. There was another piece of evidence, which is that in studies which have absolutely nothing to do with the ones that Stuart Hameroff, my anesthetic, I don't know, I did mention his name, I heard before, Stuart Hameroff, nothing to do with his work, quite independently of this, have been exploring exactly the way in which general anesthetics, what parts of cells that do relate to and what ones they basically knock out. And it does now appear that these are microtubules. This is very recent research, because there's been a lot of argument about that. So I think there is evidence suggesting that microtubules are important. Of course, a lot more work will have to be done to see how important is it really that they're the main place where consciousness comes in. There's also evidence that microtubules have a very peculiar role in relation to electrical conductivity. It doesn't directly tell you anything about quantum mechanics. I mean, what's that got to do with quantum mechanics? We don't know. The Anirban Bandyopadhyay's observations have a sort of feel of quantum mechanics about it, but it's not directly connected with what I was saying at the beginning. It's just that it looks as though there's part of a story which may be coming together, and maybe we'll see that we are having a role for large-scale coherent quantum mechanical effects in microtubules, which are the sort of place where you could build up enough mass displacement to influence the structure of the connections between neurons. So the argument basically is that neurons are not the place where consciousness is occurring. It's the neurons which are if you like, magnifying the signals to a level where you can move your arms around, as I'm doing here, and things like that. So it's not okay. The story is developing. Sorry, that was a long answer to this question, which I hope was an answer, and I hope I can give you shorter answers.
Okay, so maybe next question.
We were talking about quantum mechanics. Actually, we have this beautiful theory which explains really a lot about what we are doing. We have beautiful mathematics which work in there. But if we try to ask some questions about axiomatics, for example, what is wave function or something like this, we actually don't have any answers. We have interpretations, lots of them. Even you have one, if I remember.
Yeah.
I mean, lots of physicists use quantum mechanics without knowing why they use it and how to use it properly. Do you think if it is a problem for us and how to solve it?
I think it's a problem not so much for us. I mean, you might think that the problem is we don't understand it right and we can't explain it and so on. I mean, I think the problem is to a large extent in the theory. It's very hard to understand. Not just mathematically difficult. I don't think it. I mean, people used to say general relativity is very difficult to understand. Well, it's not difficult. Okay, you've got to understand differential geometry and things like that in general relativity. But there, at least you have a clear picture of how the theory relates to the world. You say this theory describes how space and time is. It tells you how clocks behave, and these things, you sort of know what you're talking about. Whereas in quantum mechanics, as you're, I think, saying, we don't quite know what the wave function is. Is it really there, or isn't it? Is the world a wave function? I mean, sometimes people talk about the wave function of the universe, but it doesn't seem to be much like the universe we know. I mean, there aren't things in it, and so on. It's not quite. You want to be able to describe a world with things in it, like this, which are located in definite positions, and so on, where you could, a wave function is only, well, people say, well, it's only describing probabilities of things. Well, it's not probabilities, because probabilities are real numbers, and wave function is talking about complex numbers. And these complex numbers are not probabilities. Well, the probability amplitudes, what's that? Well, it's something which, when you square the modulus of it, you get a probability. Well, it's not really quite that either. You need to know what these things are before you know what quantum mechanics is talking about. And it's not clear what the ontology is. I mean, the ontology means how does that theory, the symbols you write down, how do they correspond to the world? And it doesn't have a clear answer to that question. I always often say, you know, I was asked once recently, and it was an Oxford debating place. Well, it wasn't one of the big debates there, but where the question was whether philosophers are useful, or philosophy is useful in science. And I made the point that, well, I wasn't sure. I think philosophy is useful. It's good to have your philosophy and to think in terms of a well-defined philosophy and so on. But whether philosophers are useful, I wasn't so sure. But I thought that the Oxford philosophers, for example, I would say, as far as I know, the philosophy department at Oxford knows more physics than anywhere else in the world, I think, as a philosophy department. And they really are very good at quantum mechanics and things like that. But the trouble is, as far as my concern is, that they have completely not done their job. See, what is a philosopher's job? It's telling other people, who are maybe not philosophers, when they're not being very consistent about things like ontology, you see. So they should be telling the physicists, look, you haven't got a clear ontology on your theory, do something about it. Find a theory with a good, clear ontology, what the thing actually means in the world. They don't do that. The ones in Oxford, they go along a route, I don't want to be rude to anybody here, but they go along a route which is, to me, a rather strange route, namely the many worlds view. You say that Schrödinger's cat is dead and alive at the same time, and you come and look at it, and there's one of you that sees the dead cat, and another version of you sees the live cat, and you coexist in sort of separate universes, in a sense. Now, that's not an uncommon view. This view is becoming more and more common, unfortunately, in my view. It's certainly very strong amongst the philosophers in Oxford. And rather than saying, look, this is where we're led, it's ridiculous, find us a better theory, which would be my attitude to what a philosopher should be doing. So, I don't know, this is relating to your question, I've not quite answered it. But I mean, I'm saying that the problem is that the physicists aren't very clear about what they mean. And it's not their fault, it's because the theory, in my view, isn't really quite right. And it's not that, you see, you could say, is the wave function real? Well, I rather tend to that view. I rather think that it is pretty real. You could ask a question of a wave function, you could say,